Hi, everybody. Welcome to North of MAGA. I'm your host, Pierre Shields. And today we're going to talk about the speech that Mark Carney just gave in Ottawa. Um, let's dive in. Mark Carney delivered a speech on October 22nd, 2025. In this address, he laid out a bold new direction for Canada's economy. The focus? Reducing dependence on the U.S., realigning trade, and preparing for a new global reality. We'll walk through the key messages. We'll look at what they mean for Canadian businesses and exporters, and we'll point out what to watch in the months ahead. Let's get started. The big picture. For decades, Canada has had a very close economic relationship with the United States. Exports, investments, and supply chains have been tightly linked across the border. But according to Carney, that relationship has become vulnerability. He stated, many of our former strengths, based on close ties to America, have become our vulnerabilities. Recent U.S. tariffs on Canadian steel, aluminum, and autos have triggered what he calls a necessary pivot. So this speech serves as a reset moment. Canada saying we're going to chart a more diversified, more sovereign path. One of the headline commitments, Canada will double its non-U.S. exports over the next decade. And the upcoming budget will combine spending discipline with ambitious investment. All of this forms part of what Carney described as a strategic transition for Canada. Key pillars of the plan. Let's break down the major pillars of Carney's plan. Pillar 1, export diversification and trade realignment. The target? Doubling non-U.S. exports in 10 years. He emphasized that Canada must engage more deeply with markets like India and China. He also warned that Canada will not accept unfair access for the U.S. and Canadian markets. If talks fail, Canada is ready to change the terms. Pillar 2, fiscal strategy. Discipline plus investment. Carney said all ministries will be asked to cut non-essential spending. At the same time, certain areas will get protected investment. Defense, infrastructure, housing, climate. He forecasted a larger short-term deficit as Canada shifts course. But his plan targets returning to an operating balance within 3 years. Pillar 3, sovereignty, defense, and infrastructure. He described Canada as an energy superpower with multiple global trade options. Infrastructure builds, especially in energy, housing, and climate adaptation, will be central. Defense spending will also increase. The message? Canada must control its own future rather than rely solely on U.S. goodwill. Pillar 4, appeal to the next generation. Speaking directly to students and young Canadians, Carney asked for patience, buy-in, and willingness to support the transformation. This signals that the government sees the moment as generational, not just short-term politics. What it means for business. Now, let's zoom in on what this shift means for you, especially if you're a Canadian business, exporter, or investor. Exporter opportunities. With the goal to double non-U.S. exports, watch for trade missions and government support focused on non-American markets. If you're in sectors like steel, aluminum, auto parts, or energy, now is the moment to diversify your market risk. Supply chain rethink. The speech suggests less reliance on U.S. supply chains. That may favor reshoring or nearshoring within Canada or sourcing from multiple geographies. Financial incentives or government facilitation may follow. Government procurement and infrastructure. Big infrastructure investment signals opportunities for firms in construction, materials, and green tech. Procurement may favor Canadian content and resilience. Keep this in mind when pursuing government contracts. Fiscal constraints and implications. While there is investment, Carney emphasized discipline. Companies relying on government subsidies should see support as selective rather than across the board. Also, expect greater scrutiny on value for money and transparency for contracts. Risks and uncertainty. Transitioning away from the U.S. market takes time. Businesses must act, but also navigate risk if alternatives are not yet mature. The budget is scheduled for November 4th, and the government is a minority government. Implementation will matter. Challenges and questions ahead. No major shift comes without hurdles. Here are key questions. Can Canada achieve the scale and speed required to double non-U.S. exports? Will the budget successfully deliver both spending discipline and investment? With a minority government, will the agenda face delays or compromises? How will global shocks, example trade disruptions, commodity swings, recession risks, affect the plan? Are Canadian firms ready for this shift? Many remain U.S.-centric, and changing mindset, logistics, and relationships takes effort and capital. In short, the plan is bold. Execution will determine whether it becomes real or remains rhetorical. What to watch for? Here are the upcoming milestones and indicators to follow. November 4th, 2025, the budget. This will detail how the commitments become action. Watch for spending cuts, new investments, export support measures, trade missions, and new agreements, especially with India, China, and other non-U.S. partners. Export data. Quarterly numbers showing if non-U.S. exports growth accelerates. Business investment trends. Are Canadian firms investing abroad or diversifying supply chains? Major infrastructure contracts. Announcements, awards, timelines in housing, climate adaptation, energy and defense. Fiscal metrics. Is the deficit in line with forecasts? Will Canada hit operating balance on schedule? Political developments. Since it's a minority government, watch for coalition dynamics, compromises, and delays. By keeping an eye on those, you'll see whether this speech is the start of a paradigm shift or simply commentary. Key quotes and takeaways. Let's wrap it up with several standout quotes and big takeaway messages. Many of our former strengths, based on close ties with America, have become our vulnerabilities. We will double non-U.S. exports in the next decade. If it's the case that the Americans have access to our markets in a way that's inappropriate, we will change the terms. When we have to make difficult choices, we will be thoughtful, transparent, and fair. Takeaways. A new trade access for Canada. Less U.S.-centric, more global. A dual-track fiscal strategy. Belt-tightening paired with growth investment. Strong message of sovereignty, resilience, and national identity. The government is signaling that business readiness matters. Change is coming. Execution matters. Strategy turning into action will define success. Thanks for watching. If you're a Canadian business owner, exporter, investor, or just interested in what's next for Canada's economy, this speech may mark a turning point. Tell me in the comments, which part of this plan do you think will matter most? Export diversification, infrastructure investment, the shift away from the U.S.? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell if you found this helpful. I'll be covering the November 4 budget announcement and its implications. So if you want to stay ahead of what's happening, make sure you're subscribed. Until next time, this is Pierre Shields for North Omega. Go play outside.